Now, I'm told shutting down government's terrible for the economy, just terrible. Simply not paying government workers chops something off GDP. President Obama said government workers are the customers of every business in this country. And the loss sounds enormous when you listen to him in the media, but economist Ben Powell says the opposite is true. The shutdown could be good for America.
First of all, let's just get some perspective here. If McDonald's laid off 40% of non-food production workers, closed a few drive-up lanes, and stopped putting the toys in the Happy Meals, we wouldn't say McDonald's shut down. So the U.S. government hasn't shut down. When people get their paychecks today and tomorrow, they're still going to see that the IRS is stealing some of their wages. I got frisked on my way here to see you today by the TSA. The NSA is probably still listening to our phone calls, and somewhere in another part of the world at this very moment, someone's in the United States military's crosshairs. This is hardly a shutdown. That said, it is a step in that direction, and I think it's a good step in that direction, especially as the public realizes that, gee, their life really didn't change that much. Maybe we could make this shutdown permanent.
President Obama said we need to do this for the person working for the Agriculture Department, helping farmers make a modest profit.
No. This is something that the government shouldn't be doing in the first place. Now,
farmers can make a profit without the Agriculture Department?
Farmers should be able to make a profit without the Agricultural Department. Otherwise, they shouldn't be farmers. So the short term, of course, people are going to have adjustment problems to it. But if the government permanently got out of this line of business, people would adjust and they would rely on themselves and their fellow Americans through voluntary transactions, not the government, to get things done.
And yet, last time the government shut down, both parties seemed to agree it was a terrible thing.
Never, ever shut the federal government down again.
They applauded.
Of course the government doesn't like a government shutdown, because some of us start to realize that these busybodies and petty tyrants in Washington, D.C. aren't necessary for our daily lives. The longer that this continues to go on, the more Americans will wake up to that fact. And of course that's bad for both Republicans and Democrats.
And the stock market last time did fine. This time there hasn't been a crash.
I don't see the big problem here. I mean, the problem is that we have a big intrusive government. If this marginally shrinks it, that should be good for the economy, good for the stock market in the long run.
Speaking of marginally shrinking, earlier this year, the so-called sequester cut 5% from discretionary spending, which is just about a third of the budget. Politicians screamed that this would be terrible.
They're hurting military communities. They're hurting middle-class families, our children, our seniors, the people who can least afford it. That's what this so-called sequester means.
And yet,
if you're watching this show, can you think of one thing in your life that changed after this sequester? My guess is the vast majority of people, the answer is no, except the good news is the other thing you're not noticing is it's not extra debt the government was racking up that they're going to try to wring out of your paychecks.
And I got excited about the lack of extra debt, thought that was a wonderful thing. And I thought it might significantly postpone America's coming bankruptcy. But I was a fool, too. Here's a video from the Peterson Foundation showing that.
When economists make projections about what our debt will look like over the next few decades,
we are clearly heading toward a crisis.
Surely the sequester, with its across-the-board spending cuts, changed the picture more sizably. And again, it seems only to have bought us a little more time.
In the big picture, the sequester barely makes any difference at all. It delays bankruptcy, but just a little.
Yeah, no, we need to make much bigger fundamental cuts. And the politicians, you've already played a clip of Pelosi going nuts about saying there's nothing left to cut. No, there's plenty left to cut. To entirely eliminate the government deficit would mean returning to a budget in real terms that's about the size that it was when Bill Clinton left office. This is hardly an era of small government.
And they're not talking about doing that. None of them seem to want to talk about entitlements.
No, Republicans or Democrats, they're both politicians who benefit from the existing system. Neither one wants to make the type of fundamental cuts necessary to get the fiscal house in order.
And yet, the polls show 70-some% of Americans oppose this shutdown.
Yeah, listen, if I could carry a tune, John, I'd sing the song. All I am saying is give shutdown a chance. So as Americans get used to the fact that this doesn't negatively impact their lives, hopefully those numbers start going in the other direction and we realize that we should really start shutting down government, not just this little bit.
It's just hard to get people to change their way of thinking. I look at Greece, where it's totally in the tank. And only after riots and months of threats, change? Did they do things like reduce required every business severance pay to 1 full year you get paid after you get let go? It used to be 2 years.
Yeah, this is the austerity that Europe has been screaming about. It's trivial. But try this. How about while we're shutting down government, we actually stop collecting taxes from people or giving them liabilities for taxes, and then we'll see how popular the shutdown gets.
But that's not going to happen. They're going to collect taxes forever. So thank you, Ben Powell of the Independent Institute.